All right, so the last thing we're going to look at, and we're going to do a couple assignments now from this, looking at all the methods, is the quadratic formula. Okay, so this quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Every year kids are like, do I really have to memorize that? And then they'll take like 2 or 3 math classes after, and they're like, thanks for making me memorize that. Yes, you're going to need to know this formula. For the rest of your life, nope. But until you're done with taking math classes in high school and college, you're going to be using this formula. A lot of kids like to use it. Okay, and so these are 4. So if I were to factor this one, okay, I would do factors of a negative 36 that add up to negative 5. And so that would be a negative 9 and 4. So that would be x squared minus 9x plus 4x minus 36. I can take out an x. I can take out a 4. So one of my factors is x minus 9, and the other is x plus 4. And if I find my roots, that means my roots are at 9 and at a negative 4. So this quadratic formula is a method that is used when it's hard questions. But we're going to start by doing it on easy ones, so then you know how to do it when we get to the hard ones. Okay, I wouldn't use the quadratic formula on this, but here's what you do on the quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals a negative 5, and C equals a negative 36. So you plug it in that formula. You have a negative B, so a negative of a negative 5, right, is going to be 5, plus or minus the square root of 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. I just do this out. Minus 4 times A times C. And if you remember, we did that for AC just a couple notes ago to figure out how many solutions, all over 2A. So that's 2. So I'm going to do the inside here. So first I would do multiplication. So a negative 4 times a negative 36 times 1, negative 4 times a negative 36 times 1 is 144. So plus, right? So that inside becomes 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 144 over 2. Okay, well 25 plus 144 is 169. So 5 plus or minus the square root of 169 over 2. Okay, and so then what happens is 169 is one of those perfect squares. Whoa. So I would have one answer that's 5 plus 13 over 2. So that's going to be 18 over 2, which is 9. And I'm going to have one that's 5 minus 13 over 2, which is a negative 8 over 2, which is a negative 4. And if you look at my answers, I have 9 and a negative 4. So the quadratic formula is another way of finding roots. And again, I don't use it all the time. I just use it on the hard ones. Okay, so if we're going to use the quadratic formula, let's go to number 1. And I'm going to move this I'm going to cut this here. Oh, it doesn't let me bring that down. Dang it. Maybe can I copy this? Copy, paste. There. We can just slide that down with us here. Okay, because and I'll let you even write that on the top of your tests. So here I've got to get it equal to 0. So that's going to be x squared minus 8x minus 20. So my A is 1, my B is a negative 8, and my C is a negative 20. So the quadratic formula is a negative B. Well, B is a negative 8, so that's 8. Plus or minus the square root of a negative 8 squared is 64. Minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So if I do the inside, negative 4 times a negative 20 becomes a positive 80. And a positive 80, that would be 8 plus or minus the square root of 144 over 2. The square root of 144 is 12, right? So you're going to have one that's 8 plus 12 divided by 2. And that answer is 20 divided by 2, which is 10. And you're going to have one that is 8 minus 12 over 2. So it's a negative 4 on the top over 2 is a negative 2. Okay, so the quadratic formula is just another way of getting your answers. If I go to Desmos and I'm going to type in that formula just like it was done. So let me do this again because sometimes it gets weird things. So it is x squared minus 8x equals 20. Okay, so if I zoom out a little bit, I got this whole, I guess it doesn't matter. I'll just zoom out. So it hits at negative 2 and a positive 10. And what did I get in purple for the answer? Negative 2 and a positive 10. Okay, so it's just another way of finding where it hits the axis. So if I go to number 3, okay, so number 3 is solve for 0, so that's awesome. A is 3, B is a negative 12, and C is 0. There's not a constant, so you just put 0. Okay, so your B, oh wait, your B is, I got those backwards, didn't I? There's no B. Okay, so you're going to do 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So if I do on my calculator, negative 4 times 3, that's a negative 12, and a negative 12 times a negative 12 is a positive 144. So you're going to have 0 plus 12, because that's the square root of 144 over 6, so that's 2. And you're going to have 0 minus 12 over 6, so that's a negative 2. So those are my 2 answers. Okay, now if I would have done this, I'm going to move this guy out of the way. Okay, if I would have done it the factoring way that we learned, right, wouldn't I take a 3 out and I get x squared minus 4? And so then that would be x minus 2, x plus 2. So one of my answers is 2, one of my answers is a negative 2, which that is what I got for answers, 2, negative 2. So it's just another way of finding answers. And I know right now it seems like, why are you teaching me all these different ways? Because sometimes one way is better than another. Okay, and so I'm just trying to show you all the ways and make sure you have them. Okay, so the 5 is solved for 0. So A is a negative 1, B is a negative 10, C is a negative 21. So I'm going to use my formula, negative B, so that's a positive 10, plus or minus the square root of 10 squared. Negative 10 squared is 100, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So that's all over a negative 2. Okay, so if I do negative times a negative times a negative, that would be a negative. 4 times 21 is 84. So inside of here, I have 100 minus 84 divided by a negative 2. Okay, I'm going to need some help. I think 100, that's 16? Yeah. So that is 10 plus or minus the square root of 16 over a negative 2. The square root of 16 is 4, so 10 plus 4 over a negative 2. That is 14 divided by negative 2 is a negative 7. There's one of my answers. And then 10 minus 4 over a negative 2. That is 6 divided by negative 2 is a negative 3. Okay, so the quadratic formula, it's just one other way of solving. I would like you to pause the video and I would like you to try 4 and 6, please. Okay, on 4, first you have to get it equal to 0. So you get x squared plus 9x equals 0. So A is 1, B is 9, C is 0. So I'm going to do a negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Well, this is 0. Right? So then wouldn't this just be a negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2? And that's always going to give you 2. The square root of 89 is 9, so negative 9 plus 9 over 2. So that would be 0 over 2, which is 0. And a negative 9 minus 9 over 2, which is a negative 18 over 2, is a negative 9. So those are my 2 answers. Okay, same thing on the next one. I have to minus this 12 first. So I get 4x squared minus 3x equals 0. So A is 4, B is a negative 3, and C is 0. So I put this in here, and it's a negative B, so that's going to be a positive 3 plus or minus B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. So it's all over 8. This is 0. So 9 minus 0 is 9. Okay, so I have one equation that is 3 plus 3 over 8. So that's 6/8, which reduces to 3/4. And I have another equation that's 3 minus 3 over 8. So that's 0 over 8, which is 0. So those are my two answers. Okay. All right, I would like to just look at number 7 together. We're not going to work 8 because I think you kind of got it. I'm going to move that formula down just so we can just zoom it with us. Okay, so I'm going to minus x, minus x, and I'm going to add 10. So that gives me x squared plus 6x plus 10 equals 0. Okay, so A is 1, B is 6, C is 10. Okay, so I'm going to do a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 36 minus 4 times 1 times 10 over 2a. So that's going to be negative 6 plus or minus 36 minus 40 over 2. So I'd have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of a negative 4 over 2. So right away, you can't square root a negative number. So your answer is going to be no solution. That means that it's not going to hit the axis. And you're going to learn later on what to do with that. Like I'm going to be the teacher that teaches that to you. And there's more to this story. I'm not teaching you everything. But if I put that original problem into this calculator, okay, x squared plus 7x, I don't know how it's going to graph, x minus 10. Okay, if you look here, I think it's way up here someplace or way down here. Okay, if you look, there's nothing. They do not equal each other. It can never happen. Nothing works. So like I can zoom way out. I'm way, way out at like 1,000,000 and there's still nothing coming up on my graph. Okay, and so that means that whenever you have a negative inside the square root, then it's no solution. Now, all of these are going to probably be factorable. So let me show you the real reason we're learning this. Okay, the real reason we're learning it is for questions like 9. Okay, 9, my A is 1, my B is 4, my C is 1. So, oops, let's move this guy down. Okay, so negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So this right here is 4, and 16 minus 4, I'm going to kind of do that, is 12. Okay, so that means that 12 can be rewritten as 4 times 3. So this becomes negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 2. Okay, so you have to look at simplifying that. So that 2 is now outside. So that would be a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. This is actually two answers. You have one that's at a negative 2 plus the square root of 3, and you have one that is at a negative 2 minus the square root of 3. Okay, so it's going to hit the axis, but it's going to hit the axis at a decimal. So let's look at that one on Desmos, just so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to put the original equation in, x squared plus 4x plus 1. So it's hitting, but they're hitting like at crazy decimals, right? Negative 2 plus the square root of 3. So if I type in negative 2 plus the square root of 3, I get a negative 0.2679. And if I go there, isn't that just rounded? Negative 2.268. Those are the same number. And if I do a negative 2 minus the square root of 3, then I get a negative 3.732. And if I click on that one, negative 3.732. So why they came up with this formula is it is a way of getting you to find answers when they're crazy decimals. Okay, so I would like to look at one more of those. Okay, I don't know that we'll do the rest, but we're going to do one more, and then I'm going to have you do like 2. So I'm going to minus 20, and that's x squared plus x minus 11. So my a is 1, my b is 1, my c is a negative 11. So that's going to be a negative b plus or minus the square root of 1 squared, which is 1, minus 4 times 1 times a negative 11, all over 2a. So inside of here, this becomes a plus 44, right? A negative and a negative. 1 plus 44. And 1 plus 44 is 45. Okay, now we did that unit where you find perfect squares. This is really 9 and 5. So the square root of 9 is 3. So this becomes a negative 1 plus or minus 3 root 5 over 2. Now this is different because this 2 does not go into those. So this is actually your final answer. You would just leave it like that as a fraction. Okay. All right, I would like you to pause the video and try 10 and 12. Okay, on 10, this is a negative 1, b is a negative 2, and c is 7. So I'm doing a negative b, so that's a positive 2. Negative 2 squared is 4 minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So that's a negative 2. Okay, and so then when I do the inside, I would do this part first. Negative 4 times a negative 1 is 4 times, that's a plus 28. So you end up getting 4 plus 28 over negative 2. 4 plus 28 is 32, right? And then if you look at that, 32 is 16 times 2. So this is 2 plus or minus 4 root 2 over a negative 2. I can divide both of them by a negative 2. So that becomes a negative 1, and now plus or minus 2 root 2. That is how you write this answer. And I know that's scary, so if we need to practice some more of these rational ones, we will. Okay, but it's just simplifying it out. Okay, on the last one, you would have to bring this 2 over before you do anything. So a is 4, b is a negative 7, and c is 2. So I'm doing a negative b plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 4 times 2. All over 2a, so that's all over 8. This stuff right here, 4 times 4 is 16 times 2. So that would be 32, and it's going to be negative. The sign didn't change. So it's going to be plus or minus 49 minus 32 all over 8. 49 minus 32 is 17. Nothing goes into 17, and 8 does not go into 7. So that's actually your answer. Okay, kind of an ugly answer. All right, I need you to let me know if you need help on any of these, if you need answers on any of them. Okay, this is a difficult assignment.